Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
A look at economic development in the urban core tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes, publisher of the Memphis Daily News. Thanks for joining us. I'm joined tonight by Sean Massey, partner at the Shopping Center Group. Thanks for being here.
Appreciate it.
Along with Reed Dahlberger, President and CEO of Edge. Thanks for being here again.
Thank you.
And Bill Dries, senior reporter with the Memphis Daily News. So I'll start with you, Sean. You've done developments and projects all over the city and county and the whole area, but there are two right now that have gotten a lot of attention that are a little outside the norm. There's a project in Binghamton. People maybe have seen along Sam Cooper and what is that?
Tillman.
In Tillman, where grocery stores, other retail's going in, and then recently announced in Fraser, the Fraser Gateway project.
Correct.
These two projects in rougher parts of town, parts that haven't had the kind of economic development and investment that say downtown has had, or East Memphis has had, or other parts of Midtown have had. How'd you get involved?
I'll start with Binghamton. Really, it was through an involvement in my church. The Christ Methodist started Binghamton Development Corporation to reestablish the neighborhood, and several of the people, including Robert Montague, who's the former executive director, was a member of the church, and they had a housing ministry that they wanted to do, housing economic development, but the long-term plan, they wanted to build a shopping center and establish a good, healthy supply of food in the neighborhood, bring a grocery store into the neighborhood, and I really am just a volunteer at the Binghamton Gateway Center. It was a 7-year volunteer so far, but it was on that part. So I'm still acting just as a facilitator and volunteer with the Binghamton Gateway. Fraser Gateway was very different. If you know, the project was subject to a truck stop being at the location and a lot of controversy that the people in Fraser did not want that type of development in their community. And I was brought in, the owner of the property is a client of mine at the Shopping Center Group on a project in West Memphis, and he said, hey, can you help us here? You know the people in Fraser. My involvement in Fraser goes back 20 years. I'm one of the co-founders of the Memphis Business Academy Charter Schools. And so I've been working in Fraser with Voice of Harmony, Youth Visions, and Memphis Business Academy for 20 years. So the opportunity to do something in Fraser that would help promote the area, bring good quality retail, that there's no shopping center built in 3 decades, and that chance to work with an existing client brought me to Fraser.
But there also had to be, demand, right? I mean, the economic demand. It can't just work. I mean, as much as it can't just be a volunteer project, right? It can't just be from the heart. It's also got to work economically.
Oh, absolutely. There is, I believe, demand. There is no new shopping centers built in Fraser in the last 3 decades. You almost have 0% vacancy rate in Fraser. Only one center that has any vacancy is actually being purchased by Memphis Business Academy and being converted to a charter school. So now you have a great density of population that is looking for goods and services that are leaking out of the community, go into other communities, whether it's Midtown Memphis, Wolf Chase, or Raleigh, that could be spent in the Fraser community.
And the location of the property is what?
It's James Road in Hollywood, right at Hollywood and I-40. Like I said, it's right next to Rodney Baber Park, and that was a big factor in the fact that Rodney Baber Park is the 2nd largest urban park in Memphis, and the edges of that park should be activated no different than Shelby Farms Park should be activated on the edges.
Yeah. Reed, we'll bring you in here. You all are involved in these projects in a new program. People know Edge if they know pilots which, more typically in the past we associate with, say, Mitsubishi coming in, or Nucor Steel, or even the retail ones. There were pilot tax incentives associated with IKEA. This is a different program for you all.
Absolutely.
And why is it important? What is the program and that focuses on these kind of projects?
Well, we call it our Community Builder Pilot. And back in 2014, 2015, the Edge Board was looking at the basic pilot program and looking to make some changes. And we realized that our historic mission, our predecessors' historic mission of working on large industrial projects or headquarters office projects was still important, but that we had a tool that could be used more broadly and hadn't been. And so we reached out at that point to what was then known as the Community Development Council for Greater Memphis, and is now Building Memphis, and asked if they would put together a group of neighborhood development leaders. And they did, and Fraser was there, and Soulsville was there, and Binghamton was there, and other leaders from distressed neighborhoods throughout the city. And we talked about the fact that we have this program. It has certain limitations under state law, but it had other limitations that we had put on it, our predecessors had put on it. And could we find a way to make that program more usable in the inner city? And what came out of that was the Community Builder Pilot, where we'll do spec projects, speculative development projects. We'll do projects with retail. While we certainly want and love to see job creation, that isn't the end all and be all of the program. We're looking to bring needed services to the inner city, eliminate blight, create job opportunities for the neighborhood, but really have more of a local neighborhood impact.
Well, and before I go to Bill, I mean, I think with the Fraser Gateway, it would look to employ 165 part-time employees, right. 11 managers, 136 full-time equivalent jobs. Excuse me, I said that wrong. It was 165 part-time jobs, an average base salary of around $23,000. So there's the construction jobs that people focus on, but then there's ongoing employment right. in the neighborhood that fits your mission, apparently.
It does indeed, and those are estimates on what the retailers will ultimately do. One of the big distinctions between the Community Builder and what we normally do. Normally, our client, our pilot recipient, is making a commitment to job creation, like those numbers you just read. In the Community Builder, because our client is the developer, we can't hold them to a job commitment. That's what we expect the retailers to do. If we get those numbers, great. If we do better, even we're even happier. But what we really want is to see, as Sean said, we want to see the grocery store, we want to see the apparel store, the household goods store, the restaurants, etc. We want to see the blight eliminated, development there, services for the neighborhood, jobs for the neighborhood, the park strengthened. There are all of those other benefits that we're really focused on.
Okay, Bill.
So, Reed, is there a transfer in ownership still involved in this, as there is with the pilots that we think of for larger projects?
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we could only change our own rules. We couldn't change some of those state rules that make the program so interesting to use. So yes, ultimately, when the pilot is closed, nominal title is transferred to Edge. Sean's client will really retain all real ownership rights and responsibilities, but no, we have to go through that transfer. We have to do all the other things that state law requires. And so at the end of the day, it is still a little bit of a blunt instrument that we are trying to use sometimes at the neighborhood level. It's one of the reasons that we've created some other kinds of tools to go along with it, like our ICE loan, Inner City Economic Development Loan Program, some other things we're working on. The pilots are still good for the somewhat larger projects with a little bit more sophisticated ownership. Doing it in Binghamton, doing it in Fraser. We have a great project, medical office, neighborhood docs, the 2800 block of Lamar Avenue. This is a long-standing small dental practice and internal medicine practice that the doctors there want to expand to better serve that neighborhood. We think it's an outstanding project. It'll add some jobs, but mostly it'll eliminate blight and bring needed services to the neighborhood. So. Yes, we have all of the terms and conditions that the state requires with the pilot program, but we've waived a lot of our own rules that made this program really not work for neighborhood projects.
Sean, the Fraser property there at Hollywood and James had been retail in the past. It had been a Treasury.
It was a Treasury store prior to my coming to Memphis back in '82, so it's been vacant for 30, 40 years at this point, but it was a great very dynamic retail corridor at one time.
So does doing this open the door? Does it help other developers see this and realize that the usual suspects in terms of locations and hot areas for this, does it open their eyes? Does it change their perspective?
It does change their perspective. It's still a lot more difficult to develop in the inner city, and without the pilot and some other incentives, we can't bridge the gap. And that's what we're trying to, if on a typical developer would go into Fraser or Binghamton or South City or someplace and try to do a standard development, he would never get the rents high enough from the retailers who base their rents based upon estimated sales to justify new construction. So therefore, we haven't seen 3 decades of no new construction in Fraser taking place. this is an incentive to say, hey, if that gap is a little bit smaller and you have a pilot or some other incentives like whether a TIF or new market tax credits or historical tax credits, maybe it can work and create some opportunities. You got those wonderful communities that are desiring goods and services. You got density, which is really important in retail, but you have no new development, and that's got to change. And with I applaud Edge and the opportunity to work with them first on Binghamton, now on Fraser, and Fraser is very much in the infancy. We could not go out and even talk to retailers until the pilot was in place.
Yeah.
Right. And the national retailers, is this a scale that's too small for what they're looking for?
No,
Okay.
not a change. Actually, retail, the trend is to go smaller, to go a little bit more. The idea of big boxes, and I just came back from a convention up in Tennessee, Kentucky, ICSC convention this week, and the trend is to go to smaller centers, more dynamic infill developments that can meet the needs to be more experimental to the customer. And that's kind of changing trends, and hopefully we're on the front end. I think when you see Binghamton, it's a very different type center, and it's going to be pretty cool.
And this, technically, the Fraser one is a $16 million project, about 100,000 square feet.
And and again, those are estimates.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
on that part, like I said, I needed the pilot in place so I could sit down with the grocery store, sit down with the apparel retailer.
Right.
I couldn't even quote them a rent until I know at
Right.
those points. It could get bigger. We have a 20-acre site that could go to 200,000 square feet. I don't think so. I think we're probably in reason within that 97 to 100,000 square foot center. The jobs and the other creation, I actually went kind of low because we're 3 years out before we're opening. That I went today's dollars. It's going to be a little higher. I would rather have them exceed it than to come out and say, hey, somebody question why it's lower.
Right, and let's go through the as we've done before, and you get asked all the time, and we've had you on the show in the past. So if it's a 15-year tax abatement, how does that work? Because the critics of these pilots say all it is a big giveaway. They don't have to pay taxes. The city's, struggling to meet its ends and balance its budget, and people like Edge are just giving away tax dollars. Tell me why that, and tell people who believe that why that's not true.
Okay, so the way this, and let's take the Binghamton project since it's under construction and will soon be open. So why do we care? Why should the community care? And Sean's really laid it out quite well. These are services that this neighborhood needs. This is a U.S. Food and Drug Administration designated food desert. People in this neighborhood have difficulty getting to the grocery stores that exist because they don't necessarily have access to personal transit. They don't own cars. They need jobs in this neighborhood. This is also a blight elimination project. So it does many things that I would hope we would all want to see happen in the Binghamton community. But as Sean says, the numbers don't quite work. It doesn't pencil. So what the abatement does is it says, of the taxes you would otherwise pay, you're going to pay 25%, and we're going to abate or forgive 75%. Even doing that, however, just think of this. This is a vacant piece of land. There are virtually no taxes being paid on this land today. You're going to put up they are putting up a multi-million-dollar retail center. During the pilot, the amount of real estate tax alone that the city and county will receive will go up dramatically from the Binghamton project. So we as a community are getting more real estate tax, plus all of the other taxes that will be derived from this project. The companies that are there spending money in the communities, their employees spending money in the community. But real estate taxes go up, other taxes go up. We eliminate blight, we provide needed services to the community, we provide jobs to the community. And what did it really cost us? Really nothing, because as Sean has said, without the abatement, that was going to be an empty field. Might have been a football field, might have been a baseball field, but it wasn't going to be a productive asset for the community. So we really gave up zero to get this phenomenal new project.
And I have a bunch of questions, but one would be the other criticism of pilots in Memphis and Shelby County people say, well, Nashville doesn't do them. Nashville does TIFs, and Sean mentioned TIF. They don't do anywhere near this many. And why, you all have the authority to do TIFs,
Yes.
is that correct? Why aren't there more TIFs done historically in Memphis and Shelby County?
Well, I can't truthfully answer the question. I can tell you that up until fairly recently, there were just two.
Yeah.
One dating back to the early 2000s, which is the Uptown Project, and then
which is one of the housing projects that was torn down and replaced.
Well,
right?
it's actually, that's part of it, but the Uptown Project is huge. It's 5,000 some odd parcels, and it stretches from Mud Island essentially to the medical district. And that project continues. And then in around the 2007-2008 timeframe, we had the Highland Row project on Highland Street near the university, which is the mixed-use project that's just coming out of the ground today. So really two up until the last couple of years. As we sit here today, there are 6 approved TIFs. So we've had 4 just in the last few years. One in Lakeland, one in Millington, and 2 others in Memphis. We had the Binghamton project, which was introduced to the County Commission yesterday and is just beginning its journey through the approval process. And truthfully, there are probably at least a half dozen others under consideration. So I don't know why we historically didn't look at it, but clearly we have seen the light as a community.
And I should have done this at the outset. A TIF is different than a pilot in what way? How does that incentive work if in a TIF district?
That's a show unto itself. At a high level, pilots and TIFs both do the exact same thing. They take some of the property tax, real and personal property tax. They take some of the property tax that otherwise would go to, say, the city and the county, and they invest it back in the project. The mechanics of how they work are very different. Some projects are much better as TIFs, some projects are much better as pilots. That gets into the weeds, into the mechanics. But at the high level, they're both taking property taxes that otherwise would have gone to the city and county had the project happened, and investing them back in so the project in fact can happen. So that Sean can go out and sell the Fraser retail space, or lease the retail space.
Right. From your point of view, from a developer's point of view, if you're looking at incentives, does pilot versus TIF matter?
Pilots are project specific, where a TIF is area specific. So from a developer's point of view, a pilot is easier in the sense of that I can go in and say it's specific for my project. You have to have a more of a macro view looking at a TIF. It's like because your TIF district is going to be greater than your real property that you're building on, and you're getting the incremental tax lift from those other properties that are coming to you to build your project. And it's a little bit more difficult, a little bit more challenging, a little bit more controversial in the sense. It's a lovely tool that developers should have. Again, coming back from Nashville and seeing all the construction going on and everything by TIFs, it's a great way to develop. The pilot, and because of the ease that it put into it at Edge recently, is just a good first step. We could end up in Fraser, and I'm talking with the CDCs up there trying to establish a district in the future. Binghamton just submitted their TIF district along with the other developers there. But it's how you allocate those taxes as they're collected to the different developments, and which really one lifted up. The pilot was the first step.
Yeah.
And they're not mutually exclusive. So Binghamton, we have a pilot on the retail development. The TIF district encompasses that and is much larger. In the Uptown district, we have a pilot approved on the grocery store there on Jackson, the former now long vacant grocery store, which is part of the larger TIF district, because the development entity thought, if we're ever going to find a grocery store to come in there, we're going to need everything we can throw at it. So the two can work hand in hand.
Speaking of grocery stores, Sean, everybody, it seems that we talk to says supermarkets are really, really hard to do. Are they easier now? Is the degree of difficulty similar?
They're extremely hard to do. Like I said, it took me 7 years to find a grocery store to go into Binghamton. I hope from what I learned in Binghamton, I can leverage to go into Fraser. Already talking to them, it is a challenge because most of the independent grocery stores tend to go into second generation space. We're talking new construction. They are able to get a lower rate, and that's why the pilot helps us. The changing nature of the grocery store with the Amazon, Whole Foods purchase, and the whole dynamics of having delivered groceries, it's very challenging. And without the tools, I couldn't get them to sit down. We do have interest because of density. People in those communities are buying food. in an inner city, I think from a grocery store point of view, and there's operational issues that they have to deal with shrinkage and security issues, but somebody in those communities of Binghamton, Fraser, South City, Whitehaven, were more likely to buy at a grocery store than to have Amazon deliver. So I think.
And part of the discussion has always been, okay, well let's have a supermarket or a grocery store in these certifiable food deserts, but someone who has a supermarket chain, big or small, are they necessarily seeing that, or do supermarkets operate these days on more of a hub concept, if you will?
No, they look at the neighborhoods and all that part. And I just want to clarify, Binghamton is a certified food desert. Mm-hmm. The location of the Fraser Gateway Center is surrounded by a food desert. Fraser itself is not a food desert.
Okay.
It's just the amount of grocery stores that are in Fraser that are supplying goods and services are not necessarily always providing healthy goods and healthy food, healthy alternatives. You have a great Superloaf store, you have a great Kroger store. A lot of the independent stores that come in and say, hey, we're not a food desert because all these grocery stores are there, are not necessarily providing the nutritional food that we need for our kids.
Okay. Reed, you all have also gotten involved in residential just recently at Madison and McLean. And I wanted to talk a bit about the requirement that some of those units have to be affordable housing. What's the standard for affordable? How do you define affordable in awarding these incentives?
The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development identifies income levels by community around the country for low and moderate income people. So they set the standard of what it means, the definition of what it means to be low and moderate. And under the federal guidelines, they expect that people can spend up to 30% of their income on housing. So what we do with those units is we say that at least, and ours is a sliding scale, so it's between 10 and 20% of all the units are required to be available for people who are of low and moderate income. So we take a look at what HUD says, on any given year we'll take a look at what HUD says those definitions are for our community, what's 30% of that income. We have to have units that those people can afford to lease, and we'll enforce it on an annual basis. It was important to Mayor Strickland, it was important to Mayor Luttrell that as we were trying to build density, as Sean's mentioned on several occasions, is so critically important, that we make sure that we accommodate all Memphians as we do this.
And this is the project, Madison and McLean.
This is our very first residential project.
And is that, how many, I mean, do you have targets or goals for how many of those you'll do in a given year? Or is it just as the developers come to you? How do you market yourself, or do you market yourself that this is now available?
So we set this up as a trial program because we've not done this before. We said we'll do up to 10 of these projects, and then we'll call a timeout, and we'll reconvene the board, the mayors, and see, is it working the way we want it to work? And if so, do we continue it? Do we tweak it? Do we discontinue it? We have not really marketed the program, but word has gotten out. And so developers have, quite frankly, been coming to us. We're working within the parkways. We're working in conjunction with the Downtown Memphis Commission and their Center City Revenue Finance Corp. I believe that over the next few months, they'll be modifying their program, and I think they'll become a little bit more aggressive and probably take over, if you will, or the projects within the loop. And then we're going to focus our attention outside the parkways throughout the rest of the city.
Okay, because the project that has been sort of off and on at Union and McLean, just down the street, the
Bells Project.
The Bells Project. That's not you all. That's Downtown Memphis is doing that one.
Yes.
Would you hand off the Madison McLean one to Downtown Memphis, or no? That's done. That's going to stay with you.
That'll stay with us. Again, these projects that come along as Downtown Memphis Commission is repositioning themselves, we'll take care of those, and then when they're ready, we'll step aside.
And what about the big one, the Overton Gateway that people are talking about, right off Sam Cooper, where it intersects with the park? Right. Is that were you all involved with that one?
We have not had discussions with them at this point, because MRG is the same firm that we're dealing with at Madison and McLean. State law right now makes it a little bit difficult, a little bit more clunky, if you will, to do these kind of projects outside the parkway. So we talked earlier about state law and how it sometimes gets in our way. We will be approaching the legislature later this year and hopefully early next year as they reconvene to try to do a carve out for Shelby County, because Mayor Strickland and Mayor Luttrell are convinced that this is a tool that we need in all our neighborhoods. And we don't have to be making it more difficult to do it in Whitehaven or Orange Mound or New Chicago, et cetera. If anything, it ought to be easier because the challenges there are that much greater.
Yeah, and Sean, just a minute left. When people you work with, peers of yours, other developers, when they hear about these incentives some people I think look at incentives they understand, okay, Fraser and Gateway have been underserved, but now we're talking about Midtown. Midtown's happening, Midtown's hot, downtown's hot. Why would there continue to be incentives in those areas? What's the talk among developers about the need for incentives in ostensibly very popular places like Midtown and downtown?
Again, it's still sometimes bridging a gap. You have very expensive land. You have infrastructure that has to be upgraded. It's not necessarily for the development and the construction, but when you don't have, if the sewer system, street networks need to be put in place, lighting, and some of those additional costs just require some incentives to bridge the gap to make it an economically viable project.
Okay, well that is all the time we have. Thank you for being here, and thank you for joining us. Join us again next week.